Hey everybody, Grumbles here with some more War Thunder Simulator battle footage. Now, as I have mentioned before, I have a lot of real-life work this month, so I did not have that much time for War Thunder other than playing a few more Combined Arms matches. So I figured I will show you some more close air support footage and give you a few more thoughts on the current Combined Arms balancing and a few ideas about it. As I said, I did not have that much time, so my opinion is of course based on the planes that I flew. I did not fly fighters with high caliber cannons, for example, like the Yak-9D or the K. During the closed beta there was a problem with those planes' cannon damage versus tanks, and I'm not sure if this had been fixed yet. I will take a look at those fighters at a later time. In this video I fly mostly the IL-2 again, and also the PE-2 a little bit. I found the IL-2 to be so far the most effective ground attack plane, which I guess is not that surprising, that is what the plane was built to do after all. The IL-2 is maneuverable and a stable gun platform with a good selection of effective weapons, especially the 132mm rockets do very well. On the German side I had the most success with the Stuka, especially the D5 version. I have not tried the HS-129 a lot yet, since even though it is a single-seat aircraft, it does not have a cockpit in simulator battle mode, and flying with the virtual cockpit only is weird and in my opinion does not look very good in a video. I hope it will get its cockpit soon, as the plane has some interesting armament options. Now, what I would like to talk about first is my opinion on the balance of the different weapon systems so far in air-to-ground combat. By that I mean guns, machine guns, cannons, rockets and bombs. How well they work at the moment and what problem might arise in the future. Let's start with the guns. What I've tested mostly so far are 20mm cannons like the MG151 and the CL-30 of the HE112, the 23mm of the IL-2 of course, and a few rounds with the 37mm of the Ju-87G2. Now, the 20mm cannons, not surprisingly, proved to be pretty ineffective against everything but the lowest tier and open-top tanks. Even when attacking from a steep angle from above, those cannons simply don't have the penetration to get even through the top armor. So you can damage tracks and suspension, but usually not much else unless you get very lucky. But starting with the 23mm cannons on the IL-2, things get a little bit more interesting. Now, the 23mm of the IL-2 of course still does not have the penetration to get through the front or the side armor of most vehicles it will meet. However, the weakest part of the armor of a tank is of course the roof, and there the 23mm can get through and destroy a tank pretty fast. However, this requires an attack from a pretty steep angle. If you are too shallow, the line of sight thickness of the top armor will get too high to get through even the roof. After all, it is just a 23mm cannon, so it does not need much to stop it. So, while you can take out tanks with the 23mm cannons, the high-angle dive attacks that you need to do in order to get through a tank's armor are not that easy to pull off. The IL-2 does not have dive brakes, and you will have only a very short time to spot the target, aim for it and get your shots off before you have to pull up to avoid plowing into the ground. Your best chance is of course to aim for the engine deck, because the armor above the engine is often the weakest because of radiators and similar things located there. If aiming for the engine, you can probably get away with a slightly less steep attack. In any case, the IL-2's cannons can take out tanks, even though the maneuver to do it reliably needs some practice. That I really like. It means you can stay in the fight and still be useful against players when you run out of other ordnance. With the 37mm cannon of the Ju-87G1 and 2, things look a little different. Those guns of course have much better penetration. It would still not be enough to get through a D-34 for example if the gun would be mounted on a tank and fired from the ground. However, a lot of the D-34's armor protection comes from the slope of the armor, which is easy to negate even in a relatively shallow dive. So on a D-34 you can get through the rear, side and even the front at close ranges with the BK-37 if you choose the angle of your attack in such a way that you negate the slope of the armor. then you only have to deal with 45mm of armor at the front and 40mm at the rear, which the BK-37 can deal with. Now, versus KV tanks, this of course looks a little different. The KV's armor does not depend on sloping, and an attack at an angle at the side or rear will even increase the line of sight thickness of the armor, because the impact angle of the rounds is increased. So against KV tanks you will most likely also have to use a very steep dive attack against the top armor of the tank to be successful, and as with the IL-2, this maneuver requires practice. The G-Stukers also don't have a dive brake. So with those large caliber guns you can be effective against tanks if you do it right. However, most fighters, even fighter bombers and bombers in the game, do not have such weapons, but are equipped with heavy machine guns or smaller 20mm cannons, for example. And for those planes I would like to see some more opportunities to use those weapons in a meaningful way. For example, a B-47 Thunderbolt of course can carry bombs and missiles, but it is most famous for its 8 50-caliber machine guns, and I think it would be a pity if the plane could not use them when employed in a fighter bomber role. I would like to see some more soft targets on the ground whose destruction has some impact on the game. And as usual, the Kursk map already has some small examples for what I would like to see. The anti-tank guns on this map are a good target for strafing runs, and destroying them does make a difference to the people on the ground. To recapture the point, you need to destroy all those AT guns first, for example, and often the fastest way to do that is strafing them in a plane. And I had some examples where a few planes won the game by getting rid of the arty, making it possible to recapture the cap point in the last second. I would like to see a bit more of that, though there also would need to be some more adjustments to the way those guns behave, to make them not annoying for the tank drivers, as they sometimes are at the moment. What I would also like to see would be, for example, maybe some ammo truck convoys or repair vehicles around the spawn to repair and rearm tanks, which could be destroyed by strafing attacks, for example. Or artillery on the map edge, whose destruction would reduce the arty reload speed. Though the artillery system, of course, is one of the things that need to be looked at in simulator battle mode in general, and I hope it will later change to a more realistic version. Now, another idea would be on a new map, for example, to maybe have a route on the map, like a small valley for example, that is well protected by anti-tank guns and hard to cross for tanks, and the destruction of those defenses by strafing runs would open up a new route for the tanks to, for example, flank the enemy. You would have to be careful, of course, that said AT guns don't have much of an impact on the rest of the playing field and are placed in such a way that they only block a certain route or a shortcut. Again, so not to make it annoying for the tanks. I think things like that would be nice to make machine gun armed fighter bombers more viable. Now, let's take a look at the other weapons you will usually find on a fighter bomber. Let's start with the rockets. Now, I found them so far to be the most effective anti-tank weapon, at least the larger ones like the 132mm ones. Especially since planes like the IL-2 or the PE-2 can carry quite a few of them, 8 on them of the IL-2 and 10 on the PE-2 for example. Since a well-aimed volley of 2 rockets can take out the tank, that means the IL-2 can in theory kill 4 tanks with rockets and the PE-2 5, assuming you hit of course. In comparison, most fighter bombers usually carry only enough bombs for 1 or 2 drops. The German 210mm rockets, the BR-21, can also take out tanks easily, even though they are meant to be used against bomber formation. But the Focke-Wulf 490 can carry only 2 of them, so only 1 volley. Now, in reality those rockets had a reputation of being very inaccurate. So that is something that maybe needs to be looked at, as they seem to be very accurate in War Thunder. But of course you also have to keep in mind that we usually fired them at much shorter ranges in War Thunder than they were fired at in reality. According to the information I could find about those weapons, in reality the IL-2's 132mm rockets were usually fired at ranges of over 500 meters distance. In War Thunder you will usually be much closer when you fire them, so that might be the reason for the improved accuracy. Though I don't think that is the only reason. they might just be more accurate in general. At the moment, those rockets definitely feel more effective than historic sources claim they were. In the anti-tank role, they were in reality soon replaced with shaped charge cluster bomb dispensers. So the accuracy and also the kill radius of them needs to be looked at in my opinion, and most likely adjusted downwards a little bit. At the moment, I think this is mostly countered by the fact that the AI AAA is so strong and the tanks will not render at long distance. But those things will hopefully be fixed, and then in that case I think there will be some adjustments necessary to prevent a dominance of planes in simulator battle mode. And I have similar concerns about bombs as well. I feel that starting with the 250 kg bombs, the kill radius of them is just a little bit too high. I feel the smaller ones in the 100 kilo range and below are fine, though that opinion might be influenced by the fact that I like the ballistics of the heavier bombs better, so I hit more with the larger bombs. Anyway, after flying some more and using a lot of bombs, mostly 250 kg bombs and the 109E or the BF-110, I feel that the radius in which those bombs kill tanks instantaneous is just too large. That is especially apparent when you use a large delay fuse, because then you can look back and see the bomb go off, and in such case I was often surprised how far away a tank could be from the explosion and still be completely destroyed. And I think that is especially a problem on the arcade maps with their tiny cap circles, as it is very easy for a bomber to circle above, just wait for someone to start capping, and then drop a bomb at the cap circle, which is pretty easy to hit. And a bomb of 250 kg or above will usually kill everything in the circle if it lands close to it. And I had matches where all the enemy tanks were destroyed, only enemy planes left, but nobody could cap and end the game, because if you tried, a bomb landed in the cap circle and killed everything around it. Again, on Kursk this is not such an issue, because there are no such tiny cap circles. But there is no telling how long it will take till we get more proper maps. The first new one we will get since the open beta started, Carpathian Mountains, is also a small arcade map and features those tiny cap circles. But in any case, I think the bomb damage needs to be somewhat reduced, at least for the larger ones. I think bombs doing some damage to a tank at those long distances is fine, but the range at which 250 kg and above completely destroy a tank at the moment is in my opinion too large and not realistic either. And another thing is, I would like to have a more realistic bomb sight in simulator battle mode, as the current one is just too easy to use in my opinion and far too accurate. As long as you fly somewhat level, you get laser guided bomb accuracy out of it. And I think the only reason we don't see large bombers like HE-111s just orbit around the battlefield and destroy a huge amount of tanks with their super accurate bomb sights from very high altitude is the unrealistically low render distance for player tanks. I think it would be nice if the bomb sight would at least have to be adjusted for altitude and speed. Now, some of you might say, flying in combined arms in simulator battle mode at the moment is difficult enough with the super accurate AI AAA and the low render distance for player tanks. Why do you want to make it harder? Well, I agree that at the moment the huge kill radius of the bombs and the effective rockets and the unrealistic bomb sights are countered by the overperforming AI AAA and the invisible tanks. However, tanks not rendering at distance and super accurate AI AAA should not be in simulator battle mode, and are probably just here as a not very well working balancing attempt. After all, AI tanks render a lot further than player tanks. That is actually a good way to keep AI and player tanks apart. If you can see them from further away, it's AI. If it pops up as you get closer, it's a player. Now the thing is, that reminds me a bit of how Air vs Ground was done when I played PlanetSide 2. In that game back then, the fighters had very strong rockets and could wipe out everything on the ground in split seconds. As a counter, the AAA could wipe out the fighters in split seconds. Now on paper that is balanced. Super strong fighter weapons versus super strong AA, it's even. In reality, that leads to a situation that is frustrating for both sides, air and ground. And I think Gaijin has to be careful not to stumble into the same trap, and try to balance strong bombs and rockets by having super strong AI AAA and tanks that do not render at longer distances, as it is currently the case. Both sides need to be addressed. The AI AAA of course needs to be adjusted, and there should of course not be any invisible tanks in simulator battle mode. But once this is fixed, the very accurate rockets and unrealistically large kill radius of bombs need to be looked at as well, otherwise the game might become very frustrating for tankers. That's why I mentioned that now, otherwise we might have a lot of balancing problems later down the line. Well, those are some more thoughts on combined arms, and this is it for this video. I plan on doing a few more in-depth videos about different attacker planes, explaining their ups and downs in more detail when I have a bit more time. Till then, I hope it was entertaining, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.